In 2021, the Baylor men's basketball team won the national championship. And in his book, The Road to Joy, Scott Drew, the head coach of that team, talks about the culture of joy that he established with that team. And today, joy is going to be our word. We're in our series of It's Not About You, and we've been talking about different words that relate to that. And last segment, we talked about comparison and how comparison is the thief of joy. So I thought it would be appropriate to talk about joy today and talk about why that's different than happiness and the importance of joy in our lives as well. We also talked about on that segment, and we'll put a link in the podcast to that, how we need to be rejoice always people. And joy is a noun, rejoice is a verb, and rejoice is really the active verb of joy. If we're joyful, then we're going to rejoice always in all circumstances. And so I want to give you a couple of things about joy versus happiness, and then 3 characteristics of joyful people and joyful teams. And so they did a study a while back and talking about heart patients, people who were having heart disease and heart issues and high cholesterol, high blood pressure. They were going to have surgery for some of the heart issues that they were facing. And they did a study around this. And when doctors coached up some of their people as far as if they had gone through a major surgery or they were giving them coaching advice about how to get into a healthier situation, one of the segments of doctors talked about the fear of dying and the fear-based kind of coaching. And they talked about if you don't change your lifestyle, you're going to die. And a lot of people weren't as motivated by that. Even with the fear of death, they weren't as motivated to actually make changes in their lifestyle. But when they studied doctors who gave coaching advice around the joy of living and talked about how they could have a healthier lifestyle and a more joyful outlook, and talked about things that they could be joyful about, spending time with their family and being motivated by things around that. In the study, they found that 84% of the people were more likely to make changes in their lifestyle based on joy and based on the joy of living versus the fear of dying. And both obviously can be motivators, but I think we're more motivated when we're motivated by the joy of living. And when we think about joy versus happiness, I think people sometimes use that as synonyms, but we can't use those words as synonyms because happiness is driven by circumstances. It's sustained and initiated by circumstances. If things are going well, then I'm happy. If things are going bad, then I'm not happy. I'm unhappy. And joy is something that's more of a deeper inner contentment, and it's sustained by contentment in our lives, no matter the circumstances, no matter what happens. And we have to make sure that we're nurturing joy in our lives. And so when we think about that deep inner contentment, I want to give you 3 characteristics that really pertain to what Scott Drew talked about in his book and what he nurtured in that culture of joy in that championship team that we can have in our lives every day, no matter what we do. If we're playing for a national championship, if we're an athlete playing on a certain team in any sport, or whether we're getting to lead people every day, no matter the circumstances, how we can have joy in those moments. The subtitle of Scott Drew's book, The Road to Joy, talked about leading with faith, playing with purpose, and leaving a legacy. And so I want to build on those 3 characteristics because I think it's very important for us as leaders and as influencers. And if you're listening to this podcast, whatever role you play in life, it's important that one of the characteristics is that first characteristic, leading with faith, that we're grateful for the moments. And he nurtured that in his players to be grateful for the moments. If you're facing a tough situation and you're an athlete and you're down in a game, not to get down about that, to be grateful for getting to compete, to putting on the uniform, and to playing a role on that team. If you're dealing with challenging circumstances with the team you're leading, to lead with faith, to believe that it's going to work out, and to be grateful for those moments, to be able to give advice to people, even if that's tough, constructive feedback, you're helping them realize their purpose. And so leading with faith is really important. And in that acronym of joy, Jesus was the word that stood for joy. And in my own life, that's where I find my deep inner contentment, no matter the circumstances. There are challenging circumstances that I've had to face in my life, and I'm sure you're facing challenging circumstances or have faced them in the past or will face them in the future, and maybe in all 3 contexts, past, present, and future. But in those moments, What's meant so much to me is having a deep inner contentment with my relationship with Jesus and honoring him. And I think one of the things he challenged his players to do was to glorify God in everything that they're doing and to glorify God in those moments, to get the opportunity to leverage their talent and to maximize their talent no matter what the circumstances were. So when they were, quote, playing for Jesus, they were honoring God in that moment. And I think we've been given gifts, talents, and opportunities, and also moments to display those. And we have to make sure that we're doing that with joy and that we're glorifying him first. And when we do that and we don't make it about ourselves, then we're playing for a higher purpose and playing for something that's important. And that leads to the second subtitle phrase of his book, to play with purpose. And I think teams that play for something bigger than themselves really are able to persevere through moments. When they play for something bigger than themselves, they're able to, have a higher purpose in what they're playing for. And again, when I think about a God-given purpose that I have and my calling in my life, and we've talked a lot about that, it makes it not about me, but making it about the calling that I've been created to live for and to do in all the roles that I play in life. And I think that's really important as you think about that, is to understand that and to know kind of what that is in your life and to make sure that you're playing for that higher purpose. And again, when he used that acronym of joy, he used the word O, or the letter O, and the word was others, to play for others. So when they were facing a challenging circumstance, or maybe they got into foul trouble, or maybe they weren't hitting their shot that night, they looked around and they saw who they were playing with. And again, it really led them back to playing for other people and being able to do those things. And I think when we face challenging circumstances, we hopefully have a community that we're looking around at, an inner circle and a center of influence in our lives, that we can say, hey, I'm going forward with these people, and I'm so glad to be doing that and to be playing, with joy because of the people that I'm playing with and playing for, whether that's in a literal sense or a figurative sense, whether you're doing that on the court or you're doing that in the boardroom or in the community or at home, that you're doing it with other like-minded people. And it's really important that we play with purpose, and that's where we can find contentment and joy in our lives, and we're grateful for that as well. And then the third characteristic that we see in joyful people is really, again, on that subtitle of Scott Drew's book, is living for a legacy or leaving a legacy. Again, as we said as a previous podcast, that the legacy you live is the legacy you leave. And Ken Blanchard quoted that, and I love that quote, and I quote it often about legacy. But knowing your purpose and defining your why allows you to persevere through those moments when they get tough and challenging. So making sure that we know, our purpose, that we identify what that is, and then know our why. When we're coaching athletes, we talk to them a lot about knowing your why. And when you know your why, you're able to get through those tough practices. You're able to get through those tough moments in games. And I think when we know our why about why we're leading teams or why we're in a certain role, even when we're going through a tough project or a tough time with a team, we can go back to that why, and that defines our purpose, and it gives us purpose in life to have those hard conversations or to persevere through challenging circumstances in our own lives, and knowing that there's a higher why, there's a deeper why that we're leaving a legacy with. And when we make it not about ourselves, but about the legacy and the impact and the imprint that we're having in other people's lives, it allows us to do that with joy and have that inner contentment and not get down and spiral downwards in our performance, but again, to achieve our best and to make that impact in the lives of other people. So again, playing with joy, I want you to be thinking about that this week and make sure that we're not just focusing on circumstances to define our happiness and whether we're in a good mood or a bad mood, but that we nurture a contentment and a deep inner contentment and that sense of joy in our lives. And one of the very practical ways that you can do that, and I know you've probably heard this before, but to keep a gratitude journal. And when we do that, even if it's just 3 things that we want to come up for the week that, and write that down for this week, I'm grateful for these things or these people in my lives. And don't just, put a name there. Maybe go further and say why you're grateful for that person in your life, why you're grateful for the role or opportunity that you have. Go deep in this and make sure that there's depth to the things that you're grateful for, because again, that's going to give you that inner sense of contentment and joy. And it's not the only thing. Obviously, our faith is very important in Jesus, and making sure that we nurture that contentment and joy there. But it can be a start and an outward sign of being able to keep a journal and to nurture a sense of joy based on the things that we're grateful for in life. And then it allows us to operate from that sense of joy. Don't allow comparison and looking at other people or looking at a previous self and things that we talked about in that comparison steal your joy. The enemy wants to steal your joy, but we can go out and lead with influence and impact and purpose if we have a sense of joy, and we can maximize the moments that we have. And as we always say on this podcast, make the most of the moments in your life this week with joy.